introducing tonight Julie Mora, fellow Canadian YouTuber, as well as OneGodlessWoman. She is going to be discussing some of her experiences coming from Saudi Arabia, and we're going to be talking about some issues with Canada, multiculturalism, diversity is our strength, of course, Trudeau's motto, feminism to some extent, but more just how these things interweave with women's rights. And it's going to be a pretty free-form, open discussion. We're going to try to keep it around an hour to an hour and 15. I'm happy to have you guys chatting in the background. As you can tell, I'm not great at keeping up with all these things, so I won't be looking at the chat until towards the end. I ask that you keep your questions till the end, at which time I'll let you guys know and you can put them out in the chat. If I can't get to them because of my slow computer and technical difficulties, I will read the questions later on if you want to throw them in the comments. So that is about it. I'm going to start with Julie, and I'll let her tell us all bit about herself and her channel, and basically what her intentions are with her channel.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Hey, everyone. I'm glad you're here. I think my channel is pretty simple. I keep it down to 2 topics for the most part. It's anything to do with Islam and socialism. So basically, it's totalitarianism. Anytime I find that, I don't like it. So whichever form it rears its ugly head in, I will tend to try to smack it back down where it came from. So that's pretty much what I do on my channel. And yeah, aside from that, I have 3 boys, and they're a bit crazy. Sometimes they pop in the videos. I apologize in advance if they scream today and you're going to hear them. I'm hiding in my dingy attic, so you see my lovely 1970s background. And it's in an attempt to be as far away as I could from my kids so that they wouldn't interfere here. But they're with my husband, so hopefully it all goes well. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. So there we go.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. And I quite enjoy that 1970s wallpaper and paneling myself. There you go. So next we have OneGodlessWoman. I don't know if she wants me to refer to her as OneGodlessWoman or her first name, so I'll let her introduce herself how she wishes.
On Twitter, I'm Iman. People know me. They know me. It's too late now to hide my name. So I am, well, what am I? I'm a little bit of everything. I'm a mutt, but I lived a good chunk of my existence in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, the capital. And it was under Islamic Sharia law. And then I escaped at the age of 26. That's when I came here to Canada. It was 2003 when I came here. And I was happy, so happy, until Trudeau. And then my life just, yeah, it took a turn. So here I am. I didn't even know that they call people who are on YouTube YouTubers. That's how like disconnected I am from all of this. So I do have a YouTube channel. I am on Twitter. I mainly discuss, my biggest thing is Islam. Although I do talk about politics every now and then, and I've been frequently told to shut up and not talk about politics and just focus on Islam. So that's who I am.
We have all been told, we've all been called all kinds of things. We were just chatting about that right before this. We've been told all kinds of lovely things. So good way to start. Thank you guys very much. So thank you again for being here. So basically, I'm going to start basically with the concept of, well, not the concept of, the very real issue of M103, which I know we've all talked about a little bit in our own ways, not me so much, because this is a topic I'm just kind of skirting around on now. But I'd like to hear it from both of your own words, how you feel about this, because for me, it really started to raise an alarm for me. Freedom of speech wasn't a big deal to me until this past year. And when I think of something like M103, I start to get that uneasy feeling that you mentioned, Julie, like in my gut, that something is wrong. And I feel like you can't question an ideology, and that really frightens me. So that's when I've started looking into this issue a lot more and starting to question why it is that we're being stifled. So wouldn't mind just getting your perspectives on what it feels like, in your own opinion, to be stifled like that, what you think it means, and possibly why you think it's happening. And so I guess we'll start with Julie first.
Yeah, I mean, to me, when I see M103, I see Sharia, and we had our laws in Canada. We have existing laws, and I don't think all of our Canadian law is super perfect, but it's pretty darn good, and it's pretty much more perfect than anything we've seen to date in historical terms of all populations across history and across time. So even though it's not a perfect system, I would like to preserve it. And when I see M103, which goes directly against our so-called freedom of expression that we are supposed to have, or that we claim to have here in Canada, I see an imposition of Sharia coming here, and that's where my opposition is. And you know what? I would love if Iman could jump in on that one, because I'm sure that she has even more experience with M103 coming from Saudi. Can I pass it over to you, Iman? Because I'm really interested in hearing what you'll have to say.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So with motions, like, I would actually like to go a little bit further than just M103. Go bigger, you know, go to the origins. Why do we have something like M103? Why did no other prime minister introduce such an odd motion? Do you not find it a really odd motion to suddenly become, plus it's a motion, and it has how much money now behind it? In the millions, 20 something? And studies, and we're being beaten over the head with Islamophobia, and it's just a motion. It hasn't become a law. But I would urge everyone listening to go look at the United Nations. There was a document that came out of the UN, oh my gosh, early 90s. And it was essentially the plan of the UN. And the UN, when I speak of the UN, it's not the way the West sees the UN. I know the UN is essentially Islamists. It's the barking dog of the Islamists. That's the UN. And the sad part is it really has no power. It's being given the power. So I'm going to try to tweet or send you this document so you can link it to this chat. It's a very long document, but there's a heavy section in it about condemning criticism of Islam in all of the West. And they use the word Islamophobia. This was in the 90s. And I want you now to look at every country that is being derailed like we are here in Canada. I call it derailed because that's what's happening. We're being derailed. We were on a track as a Western nation that is protected, that has its own set of rules, and suddenly we're off this track. And in this document, it's the plan that is now being implemented before our eyes, but it was in the 90s. So when I post it on Twitter, people are like, this is an old document, I'm not going to read it. No, you should. You should. Because now you can see how the Islamists operate and how patient they are. Every country that is undergoing what we are has an Islamophobia law or motion, or Islamophobia has suddenly entered the laws of this country and is being implemented. England is the worst case scenario, of course. What's happening there? I mean, look at Tommy Robinson. I mean, the man, they destroyed his life, right? So to me, M103 is just a symptom of the disease.
That's a very good way of putting it. You're right. You said, doesn't it strike you as odd? Yes, it does. It seems so strangely specific, considering that we already have protection of various religions and belief systems. It doesn't seem like it was necessary. So yeah, it absolutely doesn't sit right. So thank you. I appreciate that. I wouldn't mind also, Mon, if you don't mind continuing on this next part of the question, if you don't mind starting it off. I've noticed since I've mentioned anything to do with the concern about political Islam, because of course, and Julie, you do this in every video, hashtag not all Muslims. Of course, we know we're not speaking about every person that is involved in this religion in one way or another. I think that should be, said ahead of time. But when it comes to political Islam or Islamists, which is a very different thing, or the idea of Sharia law or having any type of fundamentalist religion infused into Canadian law and that free, democratic society, I think, when you start talking about these things, you get a lot of input, I guess, from people. Some is negative and some is positive. I've had people say, well, you conservatives always think that the problem is with Islam, and you'll never ever think of the neoliberalism that caused it. So things like, the states going in and causing wars and things of that nature. So then the argument being that it has nothing to do with Islam and everything to do with Western countries and colonialization, of course, things like that. I wouldn't mind hearing your perspective, since I can't answer to that. I didn't grow up in a country that had political Islam. Iman, you did. So I'd be curious what your response would be to that.
Thank you. I have a few points. And I know, see, the reason people see me as radical, and here in the West, they see me as radical right. I don't even know what the right is. I really don't. I know what the left is, because it's clear. But I don't know what the right is that people associate me with. I come from radical Islam. That's what I come from. And the first point I want to really hammer here is that I need to use words like political Islam. I need to use words like Islamist. I need to use words like Islamism. And these words to me are bullshit. Because there's only one Islam. Okay? There's only one. You guys here in the West have been lied to forever and a day, to a point that not you, but the major population believes that there is more than one form of Islam, but there isn't. There's only one Islam. And the end result of that is radicalism. If you don't control it, and you oppress civil and secular laws, it will radicalize, it will transform, it will mutate. This is how Islam is. But because I'm in the West, I need to convince the West with their own lingo. So I have to use words like political Islam. I have to use words like Islamists. The other thing I want to say is that there's a humongous difference between Islam and Muslim. Muslim is a human being. And we are still allowed to criticize people, by the way. Nobody is above protection. Nobody is above or protected from criticism. I don't give a shit what the government says. If you are Muslim and you're a bad person, you need to be called out. The other term is Islam. Islam is an ideology. Whatever you want to call it, a political movement, a religion, whatever. It's an ideology. Islam is a group of ideas and thoughts put together. I can criticize that too. So this whole shaming about, oh, you can't speak, you should see what happened. I had to get off Twitter before I came here. I posted about the NCCM, the National Council of Canadian Muslims, and how they're tied with the Muslim Brotherhood. Like, I spelled it out, and some person called me a simple-minded woman because I was generalizing. She said, not all Muslims are bad. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I can't make this any more clear. And I'm still being attacked. Like, I'm talking about terrorism, guys. I'm not lumping all Muslims. So on top of all of this, I find Canadians have been brainwashed. I'm sorry.
No need to apologize. This is what we need to hear. This is why we're having these really hard conversations, because it's true. You get told so many times you're racist, you're Islamophobic, you're bigoted, etc. that, you know, it reaches the point where you just, those words mean so little anymore, because you have to start standing firm and saying, okay, I know who I am. I just want to have this discussion. Let us have this bloody discussion. And it's true, though. We have been brainwashed. We have to use these special words. We have to be so cautious. And, you know, I get it. You don't want to alienate a group or whatever, but we're so much more concerned about words and hurt feelings and generalizations than we are about the death of people. And that's what's freaking me out, whether it's the issue with what's happened with like Marissa Shen and, you know, these other kind of mainstream stories in Canada. We're so worried about hurt feelings. Come on, right? It just seems crazy. So any thoughts on that, Julie?
Well, I am 100% behind Iman when she said that there's only one Islam, and it's so true. I've read the doctrine, and I've read not all the hadith. There's so many volumes, it's just almost impossible. But I've read quite a deal of Bukhari and a lot of Muslim, Sahih Muslim as well. And those are the two accepted, permissible, or like the Sahih version, right? So technically, all Muslims in the world would agree on one of those two. And there is one Islam, but like Iman, I have to use things like political Islam and This is why I always attack Islam, the ideology. And I will always do the disclosures of it's not all Muslims. And the reason I do that is because there are a lot of Muslims here in Canada and in the West in general who do realize what's happening. And it could be a simple question of they're scared. It's a big deal to become an ex-Muslim, and Iman would know even more about this, but you lose your family, you lose your support system, you lose everything that you've known until this point, especially if you're a new immigrant who just comes here, or you're like a bride that was sold into child marriage and you land here marrying a Canadian Muslim. What do you do, right? You're alone. What do you do? But there are some of these Muslims who will come on our side when they realize what's in the Quran, when they realize that their imams in the mosques have been lying to them or giving them just a washed out, bleached version of Islam and not the real one. They'll come to our side, and we need these people to fight alongside with us. And this is why I refuse to put all Muslims in one group. I absolutely do, and I will continue to do that. So but yeah, Iman, how is it to be an ex-Muslim? It's got to be hard.
Oh, it's I don't even know how to answer that. It's impossible, because when I get attacked, and I don't even care anymore when I get attacked on Twitter, when people attack me on social media generally, or in person here, I get attacked in public too. But what they don't understand is I lived true horror. I was abducted. I was thrown in solitary confinement for 3 months. I was in a cell alone with cockroaches and bugs, and I thought I was going to die. My career was destroyed. I escaped my own family, my own country. I came here, I was assaulted sexually. I was defunded when I reported my sexual assault. I was kicked out of medicine. I was called crazy. The guy who assaulted me was Muslim, by the way. Everyone sided with him. My family, I am disowned. When I came, I lost everything. I lost it all. And I had nobody to help me. I was alone. I met, I met different people. I scare them because I'm just too much of a problem for people to help. So I learned to stand my ground alone. I had to. And on top of all of this, the shaming, the hate, losing your family, losing your income, losing your life, losing your career, starting from zero, building new everything. I'm judged because I look like this. The West hates me because I look like an invader, or they look at me as some poor person, an immigrant, a refugee, or some, brainwashed thing. Or the Muslims, they see me as a whore. I keep saying, ex-Muslims, we are forever suspended between two cultures accepted by none. And we choose.
And this is exactly why the Canadians who are aware what Islam truly is, I want to help the people exactly in your situation. All women, all men, people who stand up for this and try to make a better world. They walk away from Islam because they know it's a shame. It's a shame that Canadians reject you because you're exactly the kind of refugee we want, right? Like you're the immigrant we want, right? You learn our language, you come here, you want to be Canadian, you defend our country more than Canadians. It's a shame. It's a shame, and I'm terribly sorry for everything you've gone through, especially on Canadian soil. It's very embarrassing for me as a Canadian to hear this.
No. I completely agree. Yeah, that is embarrassing to hear that of our own people. Agreed.
But something, I still love this country and I still love its people. And this is why I'm doing this. I don't care. Because you still treated me better than the shit that I came from.
Well, this is it's a hard story to hear, right? And I've watched you a few times speak, Iman, where I think I told you that when I watched you with Joe Hazelton, who interviewed you a while back, it took me 3 different times to watch all of it because your story is very poignant. And it made me have to stop and realize how many times, I admit, being an ex-liberal, there's lots of things that I have to apologize for, and ignorance that I had, and naivety. and defending the wrong side. And Islam is one of these things where I would say to my conservative parents, oh, you're being racist, or you're being, all these stupid labels. I had it all too, because for some reason you're in this denial, wanting to defend whatever it is that you think is the cool, open-minded thing at the time to defend. And it's interesting because feminists are often in this group, and they will often defend things like political Islam, which I find also fascinating, because when I hear your stories as a woman, it's heartbreaking to hear of the treatment. And you come here to tell us, here is why I left, here is what I don't want to see happen, and nobody is listening to you. And I can only imagine how isolating that must feel, because it sounds like, I mean, I've heard some of the stories of what you've endured and what you've seen that some people would consider commonplace where you come from, but to us, we're just horrified, right? And so yes, I concur. It's horrible to hear that you end up, like you said, suspended between two cultures, not really accepted by either. And I mean, if I'm hoping that we can get your word out more and more here in Canada, because this message needs to be heard. And it's not a message of hatred towards anyone. It's a message of honesty and warning and actual empathy, because you're trying to sound a warning of what's happening to people, and girls and women are disproportionately affected in many cases. So what are your guys' thoughts on the feminism idea of this? That's always something I can't wrap my head around. Why aren't feminists fighting Islam more? Any thoughts to either one of you, whoever wants to go first?
Well, I think that a lot of the feminists are not real feminists. They're just attention seekers, and they want to just do what's like the fashionable thing to do, what's going to get them the most likes on Instagram. Like, it's sad to say, but I think that's unfortunately what's happening. But I mean, if we want to talk about feminism, and I look in my area where I live in Ontario, and there's a lot more hijabi women showing up. And to me, that's concerning. But again, I'm personally offended by the hijab, because it does represent Islam, and it represents a commitment to the Sharia, right? A full commitment to Sharia. And I'm personally offended, but because we're in a tolerant country, I do tolerate the hijab. But what I'm worried about is how many of these women don't really want to be wearing it, but they're under threat. If they leave the house without it, their husband will beat them when they come back. How do we know which of the ones are wearing it because they're the so-called neo-feminists of Islam who say I'm wearing this out of choice, versus the ones who are saying I have to wear this, and if I can't leave the house without it, or else I'm in for a serious problem when I return home? We don't know. So when we see all of them, it's impossible for us to know. This is why as many as we can reach to try to bring them back, and perhaps show them that they have support in Canada from Canadians if they do want to get out of their forced arranged marriage or take the hijab off. I want us to be there and show that we are here to support these women, right? I don't know if the feminists would ever do that.
I'm happy to hear your response on that, Iman. If you have anything further to say, especially about the hijab, you spoke of that in some of your videos. I'd love the audience to hear this as well.
I'm against it all. The niqab for me is a crime. Nobody should be in a niqab. Nobody. Like, this is a crime against women. I'm sorry. It just is. The hijab needs to you need an age limit. I see little girls in hijabs. This is wrong. That's child abuse. I keep saying it's child abuse. Little girls don't choose to have their hair covered up. That's not a priority for a little girl. Little girl wants to run out and play, not be wrapped up, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. So there's a lot of wrong going on right now in Canada under the umbrella of political correctness, and it is really, really wrong. The Canadian government is criminal right now. I'm sorry. These people they have brought in, the refugees that have escaped ISIS, and then the government creates a situation very similar to what they ran away from with regards to ISIS. You can't talk about the hijab. You can't talk about the niqab. You can't talk to Muslims. You can't do this. Every time a Muslim man has assaulted any girl, what has happened here? Anything? The media won't say it. Anytime there's a terrorist attack, they tell us that these are new Canadians and we gotta love them. Anytime there is a transgression from the Muslim community, they are protected by the media and the government. Do you not think that there is actual crime happening within the Muslim community? How are they going to talk? How are they going to tell us what's going on with them if we have oppressed everything that has to do with Islam? Under the umbrella of political correctness and Islamophobia, they won't even be able, the closeted ex-Muslims won't be able to say anything. They're scared now because you have created a similar environment. And these social justice warriors, I hate them. I'm sorry. I have never seen a more ignorant bunch than these women that claim feminism, put on their little hoodies to support the hijab. Fuck off. You are no different than the morality police of Saudi Arabia or the religious police. You are the same. This is not feminism. What you're doing, you're not helping anybody. I'm sorry, I got upset.
No apologies necessary. Part of what I was thinking about with that, Iman, was you had spoken in your last video about slavery, and you mentioned a story, and I think it was 2003, and I hadn't heard of that particular story. Just the time I was into my life, I wasn't following stuff, and that was that story of the young girls in the school, and I don't even know if I can talk about it. I'll try not to talk too much about it. I'll let everyone else maybe do some research. But basically, these children there was a fire and they left the school. And it's true. It's a real story, right? I wanted to believe that it wasn't real, but it is real. And they put these kids, like basically they locked the kids in the school because they weren't wearing their appropriate covering. And it's just, I'm sorry, I sound a little bit broken up there because I'm trying to talk about this without A, getting emotional, and B, getting upset, because it's the most deplorable, disgusting story you could ever hear. Anybody that isn't mortified by that, I question very seriously their heart and mental health. And when you hear of things like that, it's like, okay, well, we think, oh, it's over there, it's never going to happen here. But what I'm concerned about, and I think what many Canadians are concerned about, is like what you're saying, like we're importing a lot of ideas then, because not everybody is against that stuff. And then you have the people that are coming here to escape these things. And as Jordan Peterson has said about free speech, if you get rid of free speech, you actually get rid of the one tool that the people who are suffering have to speak out. And like you just said, if you have something like M103 and we can't talk about anything as, say, white people, as English Canadians, as French Canadians, well, what about the Muslims that want to speak out about their experiences? They already have social constraints and religious constraints, and now they're going to have a legal constraint too. So it's just crazy. Absolutely. Either one of you can pop in. So, sorry, go ahead, Iman. I think you're just going to say something.
Well, you have to understand, like, it's the more, when it starts with motions like M103 and it just gets worse. It'll just get worse from there, and you're just going to go downhill from there. People must speak out. People must fight. You guys are the Civil West. You can't bow down like this into a dictatorship. You cannot. Come on. We came here for the freedom. And now you're just going to submit? Like, I find this amazing. And the other thing is that story is very true. It happened in Mecca. Those little girls, it was a school there was a fire in the school. And the girls and the teachers, it was an all-girls school, started to run out. And the religious police pushed them back in and locked the doors because they weren't covered. Holy shit, guys, come on. Let's not reach to this point.
Exactly.
This is the goal. Yeah.
Well, when you start mixing the ideology with state, and that's the concern, and that's where I wouldn't mind actually if you would jump in here, Julie, because you've talked a lot about socialism as well as the concerns with political Islam, and both of them basically coming into Canadian politics and into our culture. And of course, these are two very different concerns, two different very historical, I guess, concepts, right? They have very different, they've been integrated in very different ways in different places, and yet there seems to be this overlap. And I wouldn't mind hearing your take on basically the kind of cultural Marxism that we're seeing, the postmodernism rather, and of course then the concern of political Islam, because it seems like one system is being used to enforce an acceptance of another system. But that's sort of my take on it.
Yeah, all totalitarian regimes are fairly similar in the way they operate, in the way they restrict freedoms, remove weapons, and subjugate their population. I mean, Islam is doing it for 1400 years now, and they're doing it under the deity, right? So they're doing under Allah, whereas the more recent totalitarian regimes have done it in the name of no God at all. But really their means and their end goals are the same, and it's a complete control of every movement, everything you do. So both Islam and socialism will control who you are as a person, where you work, how you get to work, sometimes how many kids you have. Like it's absolutely insane that way. Islam takes it a step further, in a sense that they have very, very specific descriptions on things you have to do, how you have to wipe your bum after you go to the washroom, like very, very specific, how you pee, drink urine, camel urine when you're sick for this. Like there's so many specific things, and it's just so, but they dictate every aspect of your life, who you marry, what you do when you get up, what you do after. Like every minute of your day is basically taken over, whether you're under socialism or whether you're under Islam. So and both have very violent ways to subjugate you and to deal with dissidents who speak up against it, right? So M103 is the mild version of what is to come in Canada if we don't stop this. It'll be imprisonment soon, and fines and imprisonment. There'll be like public beatings in the street. This it's about to degenerate very, very fast if we don't wake up to see that the early signs where in our civilized world we could actually stop this. And they did the same thing under socialism. So they're all fairly the same. And the end result is always the loss of human life on a mass scale. And for the living, it's living hell, essentially. So, but Imam, I would love to hear how it was for you, but especially with the moral police, because that's a concept Canadians have never heard of. Like a lot of people have no idea what you're talking about. Would you mind explaining to us what the morality police does in Islamic world?
Absolutely, I can do that. And this is a call. I'm calling out all the social justice warriors. Stop it. Stop it, because it's ugly what you're doing. You put yourself in a moral high ground and you enforce it on others. This is policing. You can't do that. And this is essentially what the religious police, which is also known as the morality police, that infiltrate, and they run the show in these Muslim majority countries. You don't, the ruling family in a country like Saudi Arabia doesn't actually run the show. Recently, with the change in Saudi Arabia, he's getting rid of the morality police, but that's another talk, okay? Morality police, religious police are thugs. They are terrorists. Which is why I see social justice warriors as no different from terrorists like Antifa. They are the same. They are for the most part uneducated. A lot of them are prison graduates. They converted to Islam, or they fell in love with Islam in prison, and they become very radicalized in prison. They are losers, no education whatsoever. And they get off on bullying people and destroying lives. This is the function of the religious police in Saudi Arabia. And they destroy the lives of women. That's their choice. They focus on women and young girls, very young girls. Now, I'm not saying that they don't hurt men, they do, but not as focused as they do women. So when I grew up, before my abduction, before my actual horror interactions with the religious police, so prayer happens 5 times a day. This is just a small example in Saudi Arabia. 5 times a day, all the stores have to shut down. Because if they do not shut down, the morality police, who the actual police work under. Now get this is fun. The police takes its instructions from the religious police. And they're always walking behind them to protect them. So if you don't shut your store down during prayer, morality police call the actual police, and they come take you to jail and shut down your store. So sometimes what we would do, and they would immediately infiltrate the malls during prayer hours. They would just, like a mob of these bearded men, it's terrorists. They're terrorists. And they start chasing people out of the mall to go pray, and they yell. And if you oppose them, they'll take you and put you in jail if you don't go. Women, man, child, they don't care. So this is normal. This is no different than the social justice warriors or Antifa. This is just one step ahead. That's all. This will eventually become here too. Because the concept, I've never seen social justice warriors until recently. And that's what I think of when I see these people and the way they behave. I don't know who you are. You have no authority over me. Yet here you are exercising your authority over me as a social justice warrior or Antifa who actually hurt you physically. And they cover their faces up because they want the protection of no one knowing who they are. And in a lot of cases, you see the police in Toronto where Antifa was attacking faith. The police stood by. They didn't do anything. How is this any different? I mean, I see it. I'm seeing it. But no one knows this but people like me. This is why we're freaking out.
Yeah,
I don't
when you think about it, the social justice warrior, just this a 19-year-old social justice warrior could call my employer and say that I said something hateful, and my employer to be, to put arm's length with me would just fire me. The police can't fire me, but yet a simple 19-year-old social justice warrior could actually fire me from my job with the police help. It's you're right, Iman. It's horrific, really.
Exactly. They destroy lives.
Mm-hmm.
Why? For what? There's not even a crime that happened.
Yeah, it seems, you're speaking of social justice warriors, Antifa immediately came to mind, and then you said it, with these masks. It's this intention. It's the scary part for me is whether you're talking about people, with the communist sign, basically marching the streets, claiming that socialism should take over North America. These people in their masks, these people throwing rocks through windows and claiming everybody's a Nazi and whatever else. They believe that they're right, and they believe that they are policing us terrible people. They believe that they have this almost godlike cause, and in that way it's not so different than an intense religious ideology that is running a political system, like you said, like an actual moral police. It's just that we have our own policing in our own society. It's like the court of public opinion, and they can ruin your life. It's not just about saying mean things on Twitter. They can ruin everything, right? And I think you're right. I think it's a very slippery slope, and I can't help but wonder how deep this is going to go if we don't stop it, right? So I guess I wouldn't mind chatting with you guys a little bit more, I guess, on that front, because when it comes to fundamental religion, we're all from very different cultural backgrounds. I believe, Julie, you are Roman Catholic, is that correct? Yeah. By religion? I myself grew up raised Lutheran and Protestant, I guess. And Iman, of course, you are an ex-Muslim. So we're speaking from very different religious views. Now, I know one of the most common arguments against any time that we speak out against the ideology of, radical Islam or whatever, people will say, yeah, but the Pope and the children and the Jesuits and everything else and the Crusades. And of course, I'm not promoting horrible actions by any religion, but I find that to be such an interesting thing, because what I don't see from Christians right now in Canada, if anything, we're not really allowed to even say what we think half the time, but I certainly don't see the kind of things that you're describing, people being violent, people being exceptionally oppressive, right? So I'm just curious, Iman first, and then I wouldn't mind going to Julie after, just on your perspective, I guess, on whether this becomes, I guess, number one, is social justice warriorism its own sort of fundamentalist religion then, I guess? And number two, do you feel that there are any other religions right now that offer the same type of a threat? I mean, anything that's radicalized could be a threat, but do you see on a large scale, or in your experience, Iman, any comments on other religions that you see going in this direction, or if you think this is very much specific to Islam in your experience?
What is scaring me now is we've moved from the Abrahamic religions now. Now we're into some scary shit. I don't know what this is, this neo-progressive Marxism, this postmodernism. This is freaky ideologies. These elites, you guys, you need to get rid of these elites. They have too much time on their hands. They can't run countries. they fantasize about these ideologies, and that they think that this can work, and they actually think they're gods. And Trudeau behaves like he's a god. Good luck getting this man out of power, by the way. I can't wait for next year. I want to see how it's going to go. But for me, the problem, going back to the Abrahamic religions, Judaism and Christianity, for the most part, have been dumbed down enough, and people have advanced them enough and changed them enough that they're not a threat. You're not witnessing the Crusades anymore. You're not seeing the Salem witch hunts and all this crap. What you are seeing, though, is Islam. And Islam is moving. Why is this happening? Because Islam is not a religion that can easily be reformed. Islam believes Muslims, this is the doctrine now, okay? Is that this is the Quran, is the word of God, verbatim. You cannot change it. These are the instructions by this religion, by Muhammad. You cannot change a word in the Quran, not a word, without being killed. My understanding is Christianity, how many times now? Have they upgraded I don't know how many versions of the Old and the New Testament. And anyhow, you can't do that with the Quran. Impossible. So this is a big issue. You've got a book that was written by Stone Age monsters 1,400+ years ago that they still believe in now, because in it they say that this book is for all time, all places.
So I'm gonna, I don't mean to interject, but
No,
basically
fine.
I wouldn't mind then, I'm going to assume that you don't believe, because I've heard that argument too, well, is there a need to get rid of Islam as a religion because it's been destructive, or can it be reformed? That's often a question for debate. I've heard a few different people, particularly in the UK, have that debate and discussion. Do you believe then that it can be reformed, or do you believe that it would have to be kind of started from scratch as a new religion? Do you think it's possible for people to reform it in the way that maybe Christianity has? And then I'll jump to Julie after that, if that's all right.
It has to be reformed. But the people who keep saying that we need to reform Islam don't usually give us how. They don't give us the way. They don't give us the tools. So you need to press these people on how you're going to reform it. My concept is, good luck. But the major countries, all the Muslim countries, need to sit somewhere, get Islam out of all the West, get the Muslim majority countries to reform it, and reintroduce it to some form of a figurehead. That figurehead can study the Reformation and eventually bring it back. But as it is, Islam needs to be rejected.
Well put. Go ahead, Julie, your thoughts on this topic as well.
I would love to believe that Islam can be reformed, but since it is the words of Allah, they're perfect, they're eternal, and they're for all humans. So this is what they say. This is what Islam says, not me. But I don't see how it can be reformed. I think if some scholars could get together and perhaps decide voluntarily to only adopt the Meccan passages, which is our more peaceful passages, and completely reject the Medinan Quran, which is the part of the Quran that has all the jihad violence, then perhaps. But I don't see how any serious Muslim scholar would ever stand by that, because they would say, no, you cannot mess with the words that are in the Quran. You cannot touch anything. Just like Iman said, she's absolutely correct. You cannot touch a word. You cannot reorder it. You cannot modify it, and you cannot even interpret it. You just do as is instructed, right? So I don't see how we can actually, survive Islam without it taking over. We either fight it or we submit. Those are the two choices. And I think in the West, our job is to fight it. And I think we need to keep the Muslim population to a small percentage in the West to allow us to not be subverted.
Yeah, that seems like we need to be really thinking about actual reality and strategy. Like you said, Iman, we can all talk about reform. That doesn't mean anything without an actual plan, and it would take an immense amount of work from an immense amount of people, and I don't know if that is realistic. It sounds a little utopian, much like the Marxists like to think that is a possibility. So basically here we're running at about 13 minutes to whatever hour you're in. I am going to open it up in the chat now for anyone who's hanging out in the chat and would like to ask a question of any of us. I'm going to be checking it on my phone. I'm a little slow at this process. Please be careful. I have noticed there is one to get us started with. Blackboard 63 asks, good afternoon, ladies. Should Muslims be considered, probably should Islam be considered a religion or more likely a government? Is their question. We've somewhat chatted about that, but I will get Iman to go first, and then Julie, you can jump in after, and then we'll go with the next question.
It's a religion. It should never be in a government. I'm sorry. No, big no. And I gotta run out for 2 seconds, guys. I'll be right back.
Not a problem. I will take that over to Julie, and then we'll see if anyone else has a question.
Yeah, well, Islam is everything. It's a totalitarian way of life, and it does have a religious component. It has a political component, a social component, a judicial component. It has everything. Islam is every minute of your day is about Islam. So it needs to be stopped in the West. The job of the West and the civilized world is to stop it. And the Muslim world, the Islamic world, needs to deal with if they want a reformation or not. That's really not up to us at this point. It has to be done within their own. They have to clean up their own house. And before we can let people here come and tell us that we have to adopt 103, I would rather they clean up their own house. And until they do, we're just going to have to say we cannot allow these kinds of laws here.
Yes, that's very true. And it's going to have to be, this is why I appreciate Iman's view, it's going to have to be a lot of the population of people that are either active Muslims or ex-Muslims are going to have to speak out more about this. That's something I wish we saw more of, was people in that group speaking out against when somebody does something terrible. And instead it seems like we get a lot of visions of, say, I don't know, somebody throwing a coffee on a reporter because she thought that it was justified and not getting in any trouble. That seems to be a much more common thing in our country, but I don't know, that might just be my biased opinion. I'm going to get us to the next question here. We've got a couple. Thank you to Go Provost for the compliment on my Faith Goldie song. By the way, it's quicker than me typing. Northern Patriot asks, is there anything more beautiful than conservative women? I think that was rhetorical, but I was going to read it out anyway. And no, there is not. We are the best, clearly. Just kidding. Thank you, Northern Patriot. Thoughts on the kafala system? I'm guessing that's for Iman. That's from MTV Mickey 408.
Kafala.
Kafala, K-A-F-A-L-A.
Yes. That's basically the male guardianship system for women. And then for foreign people that are coming into the country, they can't exist. They have to have a sponsor, right? In Saudi Arabia. So like I couldn't drive, so we always had a chauffeur living in our house with part of the help. And he could not enter the country without someone sponsoring him, which was my father. And as soon as he enters the country, he is the property of my father, which is why you get a lot of abuse of housemaids and the chauffeurs and all that, because they're passed, they all their paperwork is taken to the employer and they become property, just like the woman. It's shit.
Any thoughts on that at all, Julie? I know you've done a lot more research on this than I, so if you have any thoughts, please jump in.
I just agree that it's shit. That you can't put it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like some things are in a gray zone and some things are just shit. This is just shit. Okay, good. We've established this. We've established that us three strong women, we might not call ourselves feminists, but we established this as shit. So, okay, good. I figured we were on the same page. That's awesome. All right, next question. I've got a couple here. There was one, just bear with me. Okay, so should Ibrahim Ali be deported from Canada if he is convicted of the murder of Marissa Shen? I'm going to start myself on this one, and then I'm going to pass it. I'll go to Julie this time next, and then I'll go to Iman. Should he be deported? Abso-freaking-lutely, in my opinion. I don't think it's fair for him to stay in our cushy little Canadian justice system. God, at this point, he might get sent to a bloody healing lodge if he identifies as a different culture. So, I really think it's obscene that we are being so lax on these things. I absolutely think he's got to go. Whatever they do with him when he gets back is up to them. I don't see why we should be paying for his 3 meals a day and a nice, warm bed. I feel pretty angry at that piece of shit. There's the word again. He's shit. So that's my thoughts. Anyone else? Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, deport him immediately. We should not waste one dime of our tax dollar money getting him through our court system.
Fair enough. Go ahead, Iman. Thoughts on this?
Oh, I want it. Yeah, this shouldn't have happened at all. It should not have happened. And he and all the likes of him must be deported, because we have a country to run, and we don't need ISIS criminals and terrorists here killing our children. Don't need it.
Yeah, I can't agree more. It's at that idea of literally sacrificing our children. As Joe Hazelton put it, and I used his words in my video, we're basically sacrificing our children on the altar of radical diversity, I think he said, which is sick, but true. Right, next question here. We've got about 3 more, and then I'll probably wrap it up. Opinions on Rise Canada. I'm just learning about them. I don't know anything about Rise Canada. Do either of you know anything about Rise Canada? It's in bracket.
I
Go ahead.
I follow them on YouTube. I don't know who they are, to be honest, but I do like their videos. I think they're doing an important job bringing some content that I would not have seen through anywhere else than through Rise Canada. So I don't know who they are, what they are, but some of the content they're bringing us is bang on, and we need to see it.
Okay.
I don't know. Do you know of them, Iman, or are you like me? Don't know either. Well, I'll look into it. Yeah, I'll look into it. Thank you. That was from, I can't remember who did that, but that was Blackboard 63. Thank you for the info. Next one, Notorious J says, Kelly Day, do we know specifically what Maxime Bernier's stance is on taking away special privileges and protection from certain groups or Muslims? I've been watching his interviews. He did speak with Press for Truth yesterday or the day before. He's being very cautious around this, but he does speak of reducing the number of immigrants to 250,000. I've heard some people aren't pleased with that. I suspect, given his general values and platform that I've seen, he's probably just playing the game because he knows how slippery of a slope this is and how quickly he's being called out. I think if he were to get into power in any capacity, he would have some pretty strong feelings about this. He's very concerned about losing the culture. He's very concerned about things like violence, and he wants to actually have the discussion. So he's, I think, our best chance. I don't know if it's perfect, but I don't know how much he can say without getting himself drowned in media crap. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on Maxime when it comes to this. No?
My biggest, I spoke to Maxime in our Halifax meetup, and I asked him one question, which is the only question that I want from him answered, and he answered it privately with me, but which was about political Islam, and if he's going to allow this garbage in his party as well, because I don't know anything to do with it. So he said no. He said not happening. But every time I pressed him to speak about it publicly, nothing has happened. And I understand why. I get it. It's not the time now, but I would feel so much better if he did address it publicly, but then he'd probably lose a big chunk of his platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. He would lose, and I think his hands are tied. He has to have somewhat similar platform to the conservatives with a little bit of difference and hope to get as many votes as he can, but his hands are tied, and this is why I'm worried about, what's going to happen at the next election. I'm very worried about that.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a big concern. That's one of the big issues with Maxime and vote splitting in general, right? But I'm going to go to the next one here. I've got one from El Vaquero 555. Iman, why is first cousin marriage still a thing across large parts of the Islamic world? You have mentioned that. I think AJ asked you that in the live stream, but go ahead if you want to repeat.
Still a thing? That's the way to go. It's not still a thing. It's the way. No, it's tribalism. You guys have to. But this is another thing that the West doesn't understand, that I keep trying to explain, and people call me an Islamophobe or a white supremacist. We have tribalism. So you guys now are seeing Islamism. You wait for tribalism. Ha! That's a whole different layer of garbage. God help us. It's even worse. It's 10 times worse than racism. 10 times. So tribalism is keeping your genetics clean. So they marry within the same family over and over and over and over. So you are basically promised off to your first cousin as soon as you're born, and you have no other option. There's no choice. And if you marry, if this engagement breaks off as the kids grow older, the priority remains still to first cousins. And after that, it goes out to second cousins if there's none. And then the third, and then to distant relatives, and then to the same tribe. Once we exit the same tribe, you won't get married. It's impossible. They won't allow a woman to marry anyone outside of her tribe. Not happening.
So this isn't rare. It's just the way it is.
It's just the way it is.
And it's in the Quran. It's allowed in the Quran. So this is why it's happening across the Muslim world. And the UK is getting a first glance at this right now with all their babies that are born in their modern NICUs with all sorts of very, very severe malformations and very severe problems because of first cousin marriages that are coming from most of the Pakistani community that has immigrated to the UK.
Exactly.
That's, God, I think we could probably talk for an hour about that, although I don't know if I'd want to because it just makes me pissed off. So I will just switch to the next question. And that's, I just can't imagine. You don't realize, thank you guys so much for talking about this in general, both on your channels and tonight. It's amazing how much you really start to respect the freedoms that you just take for granted as a woman. I got to choose my partner. You know, it's like Julie, you've talked about being allowed to be in the same room as your plumber. I had someone here fixing my door. I had 2 men in my house, me by myself, not a problem. These little things we don't think about in Canada that, you know, like you said, Iman, just are not in a reality for so many women. So it's just astounding to me. I have another question here. I think this is the second last one we'll do. Logan Marshall asks, what is the proper number of immigrants per year into Canada? That is such a hard question. For me personally, I think there's a big difference between things like, you know, proper vetted immigration, economic immigration, etc. I know and work with and respect a lot of immigrants. It's a very hard process. So I think that we've had a fairly successful immigration system, much like Maxime said. Right now, I feel like we should probably be halting it to very, very few and just dealing with backlog claims, because I think we have some issues to work out, if nothing else, between the people. As for future, I don't know. That's a tricky one. You guys have an answer for that?
I want to say something regarding that question, and I'm going to be called everything under the sun, which is fine. Don't care. So Trudeau, I don't know how people are looking. I know there's a big mess right now, and there's so much misinformation, so much for the transparency he promised us about this immigration. But the majority, I want to say a big chunk of it, even the Asians that are coming here, unless they're like from China, is Muslim immigrants coming in here. Trudeau has prioritized via the UN Muslim immigrants. You have even the minority Muslims are not being admitted. The Shia Muslims of Iran are not being admitted. These South African farmers who are undergoing genocide right now are not being admitted. The only people being admitted are Muslims. This is an agenda. Once any country historically, once the Muslim population exceeds 30%, you have entered Muslim majority and you're in trouble. This is a fact.
It's true. So when you ask immigration, it's not just how many immigrants, it's where are the immigrants coming from and what are they bringing with them, right? Do you have thoughts on that too, Julie, before I go to the very last question?
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quickly.
Sure.
I think if we enforce our immigration laws and we don't, we would have on our books to not provide, you know, all sorts of free stuff to people who just show up at our door, whether they come in illegally or with legal means. I think that would slow down immigration just by itself. If we just didn't offer healthcare, dental, and all that stuff to people, housing, they wouldn't come here to begin with. And then we would be left with vetting the ones who do want to come. So they would have to have money, they would have to have to secure a job in Canada, have a reason to be here. Then we could evaluate if we were to follow this kind of law for immigration, which is the pre-1960s laws that we had, both the States and Canada, we wouldn't have a problem trying to figure out how many do we let in, right? Once you vet an ideology like Islam or communism, you'd be like, okay, yeah, your application is rejected. You go back to the country you applied from, right? So it would not be an issue. If we could follow laws and have really solid laws that protect the Canadian citizens first, we would never need to deal with how many people are coming here.
Yes, that's very well put. It's not the number. It's about actually applying the proper restrictions and laws and ideas behind it that will make this a little bit more seamless than perhaps some of the chaos that we're starting to see happen. And it's funny because people don't think there's a problem now. Of course, there is. People that really pay attention are seeing it. People that don't pay attention might be able to willfully turn a blind eye right now, but it's not going to be like that forever. It's part of the reason I'm doing this. Well, it's not easy work. I don't love being on YouTube talking about controversial things and getting called a racist. But, you know, when you have a message to give out and you realize the truth, our families, you know, yeah, okay, we could live a cushy life and ignore it, but then the next generation might not have this freedom, right? This is where I feel like when you talk about things like immigration, you're automatically going to get called out, but it's talking about a very realistic issue, which is what does Canada become, right? Because when we talk about a nation of immigrants, you know, when, say, my ancestors came here, they didn't get, like you said, Julie, free healthcare and welfare benefits and everything else. They got here, they had to work the land and make it work and survive, and a lot of them didn't. It's a very, very different world now. I guess last question, actually, sorry, go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to say, it's -30 half the year in Canada. So if you don't have free anything, you have to be really motivated to make it work, because nothing grows for half the year and you're freezing. So, you know, that alone vets half the people that want to come anyways.
Yes, this is not Southern California. We have very different issues with immigration than like the Mexico wall, etc., which is a whole other ballgame. The last question I'll bring up here is kind of similar. It ties in. Wayne McLaughlin asks, why do Christian groups sponsor Muslim refugees, but no Muslim groups or the mosque sponsor Syrian Christian refugees? Also an interesting question. We don't hear much about the Christians over in Syria. We don't hear much about Christians at all. Like you said, Iman, the thing that's happening in South Africa right now, which is also horrifying, especially for myself coming from a farm. It just hits too close to home. But we just refuse to even acknowledge them, let alone bring them here and give them free stuff. So what do you guys think about that? The hypocrisy between helping, not just in this scenario, but in general, helping certain groups over others. I guess we'll go with Iman and then Julie, and then we'll do our closing up after that.
Well, it upsets me because I have enough connections in these countries that I know what's going on. And I see the Canadians have become so lazy. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not insulting anyone. I'm stating facts. People plunk themselves in front of the TV, and whatever the TV spits out them, they accept as truth. And they go out and they yell at us. And we are the ones doing all the digging, and we're the ones who, with our finger literally on the pulse, because we are so concerned. I'll tell you something. These Muslim refugees that are here from these Islamic countries, none of their countries would take you in if you needed it. I'm just going to say that and leave it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Go ahead, Julie.
Once you start understanding Sharia and Islamic doctrine as a whole, it's very clear what's happening. Under Sharia, it's stated that you are never to give precedence to non-Muslims. So if there's a spot for a Muslim and a non-Muslim, the Muslim will always take that spot. This is why Canada is bringing in Muslims only, because we are following Sharia. We don't realize it, and they're not saying, hey guys, we've switched from Canadian law to Islamic law. That's essentially is what's happening, is we are giving precedence to Muslim refugees over any other kind of refugees in Canada, and we are following Sharia.
Yep.
It's a terrifying thought, because people would say that's crazy, that's hyperbolic. Well, is it? Because the ideology is behind it. Like you said, it's not written down in legislation. That doesn't mean that it's not insidiously creeping into our system, right? And it's like I hadn't thought of it that way. There's been so many aha moments I've had since I've watched both of your videos. So I have to say thank you again for everything you've been doing. I'll close up here by basically just more or less passing it off to you guys. I want to say thanks to everyone for joining in what it looks like an awesome discussion in the chat. I read bits and pieces, so thank you so much for being here. Please share this video if you think it would benefit someone. I don't want it to end on doom and gloom. What I'd like to do is ask for both of you to recommend, I guess, whatever you think is necessary for people who want to stop this very, very quick rolling snowball, people who want to do something, people who want to speak out. If there's anything you have as advice, if there's any really, really good channels other than your own channels, which I will include in the description, anybody you think that someone should read, if there's any imams, not imams, imams that you want to follow. I know Julius showed me a few. I want to learn more. I think we all need to educate ourselves. I think that's going to be a huge part of moving forward. So I will go to Julie first, and then I will let Iman finish off. Just closing remarks, anything you want to say, and go from there.
Yeah, for me, anybody that wants to speak out, please do. And if you're not in a position where you can do that, that's completely understandable as well. But feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to make videos. I won't use people's names, but I will expose the stories the way they are in an effort to wake up other Canadians. And so at least if I can offer my support that way, that's all I'm here for.
Right on. Thank you so much, Julie. And Iman.
I want to state that I love this country, and I wouldn't be doing this if I don't love this country. And I care for the people, and I care for the culture. I fell in love here, you know? So this is why I'm doing this. And if there's any closeted ex-Muslims watching, I'm a friend. Please reach out. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not the enemy.
Beautiful. Thank you guys so much. I really value your opinions. I'm not speaking for everyone in the chat, but I'm going to guess that they feel the same. It's been very educational. I really appreciate it. If you guys are open to doing this another time, I'd be happy to on any of your channels or on mine, whichever you think. We'll stay on a little bit for a moment after we go offline. Not much else to say. Thank you guys, everyone, for being here. This will be edited so I can get rid of my first minute of blundering, and it'll be available on my channel. Like I said, please share if you feel it would be helpful. And I hope everyone has a great evening. Keep fighting. This is a beautiful country, and it is worth fighting for. Take good care, everyone. Bye.